This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy, and we were talking off air, but just some local perspective on the latest London terrorist attack. The two London terrorist attacks. In Chicago, we've equaled their body count in the last 2 weekends.
Yeah, so 5 were killed on that bridge in Westminster, 7 killed over the weekend in London, and we've had 12 people killed in the past 2 weekends. And about the same amount of people injured.
Right. And the difference with the injuries here is most of the injuries are gunshot wounds, catastrophic injuries. I'm not saying that there are not some catastrophic injuries in London from Saturday night, because there are. But just to give a little local perspective on how violent Chicago is, and you know, the idea of let's go save the world, and meanwhile we have carnage going on in our streets here. So just a little perspective. So one of the issues, of course, in the wake of these terrorist attacks, Islamic terrorist attacks, is where the voices of moderate Muslims to be heard. One of those, so here we actually talk to peaceful pluralist Muslims as opposed to manufacturing them like CNN does.
Well, CNN, they did a story and they had Muslim mothers, and there was about 4 of them with a few of their kids and husbands, that the CNN reporter asked police to take down the barricade so that they could stand behind her. So it was, I mean, as a former reporter, I know people that have done that and photographers that have done that because they want to make it look more interesting, but you can't stage a protest. Yeah. I mean, you can't, they weren't nearby, but she got them all together to stand behind her, and it doesn't sit well with me.
Gateway Pundit has the video on that if you want to check it out. It is going beyond reporting the facts on the ground, I would say. But one of the actual leaders in terms of peaceful pluralist Muslims in America is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, also served our country honorably in the U.S. Navy. And he made an interesting plea yesterday in advance of the Manchester concert that Ariana Grande and a bunch of stars put on. I mean, think of the timing of that, the terrorist attack on Saturday night, and then the concert in Manchester on Sunday night. Here's what Zuhdi Jasser had to say, in part, to Ariana Grande.
This is an appeal to Ariana Grande and all the singers coming together in Manchester Sunday night to honor the lives who died senselessly in the terror attack by the jihadist at Ariana Grande's concert, her Dangerous Woman tour. I'm here as a Muslim, as an American, as a father and a husband and a tireless reformer against radical Islam. But I'm here in a plea to tell Ariana Grande, to tell all of you, that this is a battle for our civilization as we know it. We are fighting an ideology that reaches within the hearts of Muslims and tells them that their identity is better with the Islamic State, with theocracy, with Sharia, and that the West hates them, and that the West is a conspiracy theory against being Muslim.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Dr. Jasser, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Dan. Thank you for having me.
I should mention also you're the author of the book A Battle for the Soul of Islam, which is very consistent with the plea that you had to Ariana Grande. Theresa May sort of took up your plea. Ariana Grande, not so much. But why the plea to Ariana Grande and pop stars to provide that perspective to the audience?
Well, I think it's about time now, almost 16 years after 9/11, and now 6 years into the Arab awakening, that we begin a cultural revolution. That's really all you can do. I mean, what we keep talking about, violent extremism, which is that last step when they put on a suicide belt, but these radicals don't self-combust out of nowhere. There's a process that radicalizes them, and we need to use large platforms of humanity. And what larger platform do you want than the millions and millions of followers that not only Ariana has, but Katy Perry, Usher, all the people that were at this concert? And really, we keep having a list of cities now that is extending from, Nice and Paris and San Bernardino. Now we've added Manchester and London again. Are we just going to add hashtags and do sort of the hashtag prayers every time? Or are we actually going to begin to be offensive in this war, to advocate? She said it's a dangerous woman tour. Dangerous women in Saudi Arabia and Iran and the countries that manufacture these ideas that we're fighting are in jail. There's a reason her concert was attacked. She claimed that she wants to fight that reason, but didn't really get into the ideas and thinks you can just win it by love. Love is a good thing, and you certainly need that. But we Muslims need tough love, and unless Western civilization is ready to defend its own ideas and say that not only is terrorism bad, but we're going to stand by freedom and liberty of women and teens and others to identify their own independence. And that's what being Muslim is all about, and take sides within the House of Islam and use that cultural platform, no different than the Muslims in Egypt and in Syria are trying to do in their revolutions. We're going to continue this whack-a-mole program, and we're never going to win. Homeland Security, military can't win this. This is a cultural war that people like our celebrities and our rock icons need to be a part of.
Really? Well, do you think that Muslims can do a better job of policing their own? Like if a moderate Muslim sees a jihadist or the creation of one, or sees somebody getting more agitated while at the mosque, don't you think that that person should be reported?
Absolutely. But I will tell you is, what do we mean by policing our own? There is so much denial heaped in this issue that if you ask Muslims, they'll say, if you say, well, if you see somebody violent or saying something, sure, most of them would report it. But the problem is there's so much enabling going on. There's huge denial. They think radicalization is just when they're ready to grab a rifle or bomb belt, and that means those are the radicals. Well, when the imam is preaching that Western society is corrupting their kids, when the imam is teaching that the American military is the terrorists, just like the radical terrorists of ISIS are, which is the sermon that comes out. And by the way, it looks like the imam that radicalized these London ISIS advocates was from Dearborn. He's giving speeches, was in and out of prison in Dearborn. So this online radicalization might be online, but it's happening in our backyard. And our Muslim community is in denial. It's almost like the alcoholic family that refuses to admit that some of the enabling going on in your family is actually contributing not only to the alcoholism of your father, but to his drunk driving. So it's not just the drunk driving. It's the enabling of the substance of the ideology that foments of the separatist feeling that we don't belong and we don't love freedom and secular society.
Well, right, and so taking it to America over the weekend, what do we hear from Muslims who have profile? And, of course, that's the left. Risa Aslan, who has a show on CNN, tweeted about Trump, suggesting that the travel ban is necessary and in part response to the terrorist attack in London. Risa Aslan tweeted, "This piece of Shiite is not just an embarrassment to America, but a stain on the presidency. He's an embarrassment to humankind." And then Linda Sarsour, who's this Hamas-linked Muslim advocate organizer, as she would, I guess, characterize herself, organizes a prayer vigil of sorts in front of Trump Tower, New York, and talks about how this administration is propagating hate against Muslims. So essentially the point is that in America, you have those Muslims given profile, the ones that are preaching the real problem is Islamophobia and not radical Islamic terrorism.
Exactly. And their links to terrorist groups is not a surprise because, Reza Islam might condemn terrorism, but he also belongs to the board of the North American Iranian American Council, which was a supporter of the Iranian regime and the Iran deal, et cetera. So it's not a surprise that he wants to always blame America, attack the president. And CNN's response was, quote, "Reza doesn't work with us, doesn't work for us. He just has a series on our show." And then he said, "Oh, by the way, he apologized." Well, it sounds like the mosque elders who say that, well, that imam that gave that horrific anti-American speech, he doesn't work for us. He just came to do some fundraisers for our community, and he isn't really on our payroll. Well, this is the problem, is they don't recognize that there's a difference between disagreeing with policy versus actually riling up the community into believing that it's not just a policy difference with the other side, but they are your enemies. And that's what's wrong with the verbiage of people like Reza, Linda Sarsour, who said, oh, by the way, America should learn from the Saudis because they give women 3 months maternity leave rather than actually identifying the Saudi regime as a theocratic hell for women. And this is the problem, is these are the people lifted up by media. And Sarsour is leading women's marches with icons on the left of Hollywood, when in fact the liberal women like Ezra Nomani and Raheel Raza, who are in our Muslim reform movement, are marginalized as, quote unquote, not part of the community, because the community is the Islamist establishment of conservative fundamentalists that get lifted up as, quote unquote, the Muslim, rather than us reformers who are really trying to preserve and defend Western values.
Now, Prime Minister Theresa May, who's up for re-election on Thursday, she had suggested, she laid out a 4-point plan, but she had suggested that the government would regulate online content. Do you think that would help? I mean, you said that these three were allegedly watching videos from an imam in Dearborn, Michigan.
Well, here, I have to tell you that's, again, the wrong approach. As much as we want to blame online content, it's like blaming Colombia for the drug use in the inner city of Chicago and elsewhere. The bottom line is most studies, and we work closely with a group called Quilliam Foundation out of London.
Yeah.
And Quilliam put out a paper 6 months ago that said, you know what, this focus and blaming of Google and Twitter, it's a good point. They need to be with us and not helping the Islamists, which is what they're doing. But they aren't the cause. Most of the radicalization is in the cauldrons of the mosques and the local community. The family. Look at how many now are associated with this guy out of Manchester. And the other cell now that this week we saw that a second attack might have been related. We saw the Paris attack in November 2015. That same cell went to Molenbeek in Brussels and committed an act 3-4 months later and was shielded by his own community. So most of these guys have circles of protection around them. Some may condemn violence, but yet 2/3 of British Muslims, reportedly would not turn in somebody if they thought he might want to commit an act of terror. That is the problem. Online is simply, yes, you look at it to get footprints of what they're looking at ideologically to track them. They should be definitely looking online for those 3,500, especially that they've identified as known wolves. But that's not where you solve it. You solve it culturally in the community, which is reinforcing many of the separatist ideas.
The Quilliam Foundation, that's Majid Nawaz, right?
Yep. Majid Nawaz, a former radical who has clearly identified in their organization that Islamism is the problem. And we worked with Imam Usama Hassan came to Washington to help me found the Muslim Reform Movement and write our declaration. So they're really, for the most part, on the same side. But even he, a lot of great work.
But even he, and I liked a lot of what he had to say. But I watched this hour and a half Intelligence Squared debate from about 18 months ago, where he and Reza Khan were on one side of a debate about Islam, and Ayan Hirsi Ali and Douglas Murray were on the other side. And even though he's been mugged by reality and saved by Amnesty International and believes in peaceful pluralism, is an advocate for that, even Nawaz, I thought, was making a number of rationalizations and false comparisons between the extremist element in Islam and and other religions. There was some rationalization from him too.
You're right, and he will. They signed our declaration that says that we have to condemn the Islamic State, the Caliphate, work towards equality of men and women. But I think what happens is many of these individuals become also mugged by partisan politics, and Majid is to the left of censor significantly in London. For example, he would not critically join us in criticism of his mayor there, Sadiq Khan, who long defended as an attorney Islamist. Majid bizarrely endorsed Chief Ellison. So we have our differences.
Yeah. And
I think some of what he does is more populist to the Muslim community based on constituencies rather than based on just staying true to anti-Islamism. But at the end of the day, I'd much rather have more allies like Majid than all the Islamists that are suffocating our community.
That's fair. That's fair. He is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Also, and again, served our Navy. He's U.S. naval officer, lieutenant commander. He's also the author of the book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam. And you practice internal medicine, right?
Yep, primary care. Navy put me through medical school, and to this day, still, I put bread on the table, taking care of patients, and all the extra time is volunteer put in for the American Islamic Forum.
All right, so if you need a good internist, you'd look up Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, too. Dr. Jasser, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Dan. I appreciate it.